The FBI's fight against the mafia is one of the most thrilling and dramatic chapters in the history of U.S. law enforcement. Since its founding in 1908, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has been a key player in the battle against organized crime. However, it was in the 1920s and 1930s, during the era of Prohibition, that the FBI faced its biggest challenges. Amid fierce competition with mafia groups, attempts by influential figures to infiltrate the highest echelons of power, and high-profile trials, it became clear that the fight against the mafia was not just about fighting criminals, but about waging a cold war with the criminal world. The beginning of the struggle, Prohibition, and early successes of the FBI. In 1919, the U.S. ratified the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, which prohibited the production, sale, and transportation of alcohol. This led to the rapid rise of organized crime, as the mafia quickly became one of the main suppliers of illegal alcohol. During this period, names like Al Capone, Johnny Torrio, and Vito Corleone became synonymous with the criminal era. It was also during this time that the FBI began working actively to uncover their criminal schemes. However, unlike today, when the Federal Bureau of Investigation has numerous resources and powers, in the early years of its fight against the mafia, the FBI was not yet fully prepared. It was then that the FBI leadership decided to rely on those who knew how organized crime worked, creating a special unit to fight the mafia, which would later become known as the Organized Crime Division. Al Capone, a legend they couldn't catch. Al Capone became one of the most infamous mobsters in U.S. history. His name symbolized the power of the mafia in the 1920s. Capone was at the height of his power in Chicago, and he was accused of numerous murders, illegal alcohol trading, racketeering, and other crimes. However, despite many accusations, Capone remained above the law for a long time. A significant role in his capture was played by FBI agent Elliot Ness. He and his team, known as the Untouchables, used unconventional methods such as undercover operations and secret witnesses to prove Capone's guilt in relation to tax evasion. Capone was convicted in 1931, marking one of the first major victories for the FBI in its battle against the mafia. Nevertheless, this was not a simple victory, but rather the result of numerous scandals, rumors, and even corruption within the FBI, which raised questions about how effectively law enforcement was dealing with organized crime. Clear-sighted methods of the FBI, corruption, and controversies. One of the reasons the FBI struggled to effectively fight the mafia for so long was the high level of corruption among local law enforcement and even federal agents. By the 1930s, the mafia had already infiltrated politics, business, and as it turned out, the highest echelons of power. This gave the mafia additional leverage over investigations and court proceedings. In many cases, FBI agents, working under pressure, had to confront not only mafia operatives, but also internal contradictions within the system. The FBI had to fight not just the mafia, but also the corruption within its own ranks. One such scandal involved Agent John Lanigan, who was found to be collaborating with the mafia. His name became a symbol of corruption within law enforcement. Operation California, Mafia and Politics. In the 1970s, the FBI conducted a series of secret operations to investigate the mafia. One of the most famous operations was Operation California, which involved not only criminals but also high-ranking politicians. During the investigation, it was revealed that the mafia had been involved in illegal activities in several major businesses, including the California Mafia. Many high-ranking officials were implicated in corruption, supporting mafia groups. The scandals surrounding this investigation shook not only law enforcement, but the entire country. intensifying public discontent with corruption in government institutions. The operation ultimately led to hundreds of arrests and the exposure of hidden connections between politicians and criminal organizations. Legends and myths, the mafia chase in films and reality. The FBI's fight against the mafia has given rise to many rumors and myths and has had a massive impact on culture and the arts. One of the most famous myths is the so-called Invisible War, where FBI agents supposedly fight the mafia in secret operations that never become public. This idea gave birth to famous films and series like The Godfather and Casino, which enhanced the myth of behind-the-scenes conspiracies, plots, and intrigues between the mafia and law enforcement. One of the most prominent myths is the claim that many FBI agents deliberately allow the mafia to control certain territories to avoid violating unwritten agreements of peace between the mafia and state authorities. Modern struggles, from John Gotti to contemporary cartels. In the 1980s and 1990s, the FBI continued its active battle against the mafia, facing new challenges. John Gotti, the Teflon Don, was one of the most iconic figures in this fight, who, despite numerous charges, managed to avoid conviction due to his clever legal defenses. However, the FBI's successes were not guaranteed. They had to adapt to new mafia methods, including the use of modern technologies for surveillance, wiretapping, and investigations. This also led to a new phase in the history of the fight against organized crime, drug cartels, and international mafias, which were no longer confined to the U.S. Conclusion. The FBI and the mafia represent a historic conflict full of dramatic events, high-profile trials, and corrupt intrigues. This confrontation was not only a struggle for law and order, but also for control over power and influence. The battle against the mafia in the U.S. continues to this day, and despite the FBI's successes, organized crime continues to find new ways to circumvent the law.